Well, hello and welcome everyone to the Alabama Broadcasters Association Engineering Webinar Series. I would suggest right at the outset here that since we have a rather large number on this webinar today, that everybody mute their audio and their video so we don't have a lot of clutter during the webinar. This is being recorded, so if you want to go back later and watch it again, it will be available as well. These monthly webinars are normally held, as most of you know, on the third Tuesday of each month. But because of the time frame of the subject that we have today, we thought we'd move this webinar up a couple of weeks. So we've moved it up to this particular week. We want to take time out and welcome everybody again, and also to thank the good folks at Max Connect Group for their help in underwriting our webinar series. Not only the webinar series that we do, but we also do radio classes and television engineering classes, and Max Connect Group actually sponsors those as well. So I encourage you, if you're not familiar with them, check them out at the address you see, the URL there on the screen. And if you contact them, make sure you thank them for underwriting our program. The subject today is obviously talking about the EAS National Test, which is coming up October 4th. It'll be fed at 2:20. And sort of as a way of introduction, I guess I should introduce the people that we have on the call. I'm Larry Wilkins, the chairman of the Alabama State Emergency Communications Committee, or the SECC. And joining me today is also the chairman of the South Carolina SECC, John George. Welcome, John.
Good morning.
Oh, yeah, it is. Is it a nice morning in South Carolina?
It is a very nice morning in South Carolina.
All the hurricanes are gone.
Exactly. Thank
That's
goodness.
good. We also have representatives from major manufacturers of EAS equipment that will be online with us during the webinar. Bill Robinson with Digital Alert Systems, Jim Gorman with Gorman Redlick, and Harold Price with Digital Alerting Systems. Now, they'll be available during the webinar to answer any particular questions that you might have that may pertain to their equipment itself. We encourage you to post any questions on the chat list rather than trying to answer them in person, because that could get rather confusing to us. So make sure that you do that. Just use the chat room, and we'll actually have we'll be watching it. John and I'll be watching it quite regularly here, and we'll interrupt it if you have any kind of question. So let's get started here and talk about it. The test, as we say, will be actually on the October the 4th, and it will originate and be sent out over the Integrated Public Alert and Warning Systems, that's IPAWS, and it will be at 2:20 Eastern Time and 1:20 Central Time, and so on down the line. If there is any type of a problem that particular day, whether it's a weather alert or maybe some other type of alert that would interfere, they will postpone that for a week. And I think the next Wednesday would be October the 11th. But right now it's actually scheduled to be on October the 4th. What we're trying to do on this particular webinar is go over what you need to do to prepare to make sure that your system is set up correctly. You've done all the proper preliminary stuff and your equipment is configured correctly so that you can receive and relay this particular test. Each station must register with the EAS test and reporting system. That's the ETRS. Now, most of you hopefully have already done this, because you were supposed to do this back in February, I think. Sometime in February was when it was actually due. The commission has issued a notice that you should go into that site, the ETRS site, and look at Form 1, especially if there is anything that has changed since you filed the actual Form 1 back in February. This would like maybe you changed ownerships, or you moved your studio, or you put in a different EAS device, or maybe you change your monitor sources or something like that. So they encourage you to make sure that you go onto that particular site and walk through it and make sure that there has been no changes occurred since February. And now, if you see any, you need to correct them and upload them by September 15th, which is next week. So you need to hop on that and make sure, just go over and walk through that particular form. A couple of other forms just to remind you of, form 2 of the ETRS is actually due the day of the test, or at the latest the day after the test. So that would be October the 5th. That particular form is pretty simple. It's just a sort of a yes and no. Did you receive it? Yes or no. And then that's about all there is on that one. Form 3, which is due around November 20th, and you can file it before then, of course, and that will allow you to go into a little more explanation if you had any kind of technical problems, or you missed the test, or the quality was bad, or any comments that you might have about the actual test itself at your station. Now, these forms, actually, the reason we have these forms, or the commission has these forms, is it allows them to have a way to actually check how well this test was distributed and relayed by all the stations. And John and I were talking early this morning, and I told him I was going to make a bold statement this morning. I don't see any reason, if you have your equipment set up correctly and configured correctly, barring any kind of a technical problem, a loss of the internet, or you're off the air, or whatever it happens to be, we should be getting pretty close to 100% reception and relaying of this particular test. So, because you should be receiving the required weekly test, which comes down every Monday at 11 o'clock local time. So that makes sure that that it's working. Real quickly, let me walk through just a couple items here. If you are going back over and to look at Form 1, and this will actually help you save you some time. Yeah, anybody that's got their mic open, please mute it, so we don't want a lot of chatter, because we've got well over 170 people on this particular webinar. So make sure your mic is muted. Before you start, when you go to the website, make sure that you have your ETRS login information, the username and password. That's what you filled out initially back several years ago, because this has been going on for several years now. So you should have your username and password to be able to get into that site. A few other items that you need to write down on a legal pad so that you'll know that everything is working okay. That is, make sure you have your FRN, your federal registration number handy, because it's going to ask you for that as you go through the Form 1. They'll also ask you for the call letters and also the facility ID of each station. And make sure you look that up and have that on your notepad. This will just save you some time if you haven't been in to Form 1 lately. You also need to know the make and model of your EAS equipment. And also, what is the current firmware or software version that's running on that piece of equipment? Because that's another item that's actually asked for on the form. You need the coordinates of your station transmitter sites. Now, this is a little got you, because most people think of, or actually on their license, the coordinates are normally in degrees, minutes, and seconds. This particular form, the way it's set up, wants to see it in decimal degrees. And if you've never calculated that out, it's no problem, because right there on the form, right where it asks you for the coordinates of your station transmitter site, there's a link you can click on, which will allow you to go over to that to a little calculator. You can enter your degrees, minutes, and seconds, and it will actually spit out it in decimal degrees. And remember, when you do that, since we're all over here in North America, we're on the western side of the zero latitude, make sure that on the I'm sorry, on the longitude, make sure that you put a negative sign next to the longitude. If you don't, it'll have you in some foreign country right in the middle of the ocean somewhere. So make sure that you remember to put that negative sign by the longitude itself. It needs to know the transmitter city and county, of course, and it wants to know who the day of test contact is going to be. Typically, that will be the engineer, and who should they contact on that particular day of the test on October the 4th. And they also want the two required monitor sources. Now, these are the sources that are assigned to you by the State Emergency Communications Committee. So whoever you're monitoring is the source number one and source number two, or the two record sources. Make sure that you have those listed or have them written down so you can enter them onto your form. And you can add additional sources if you like. Maybe you have, as we do here in Alabama, we have a satellite network. You can add that, or maybe using Sirius Radio or NPR1, and make sure that you can add those in there as well. For information, if you don't know who your monitor sources are supposed to be, make sure you contact your state emergency communications committee and find out. If you don't know how to get a hold of them, you can normally get this information from your state broadcast association. So make sure you have all that information written down before you actually get on to Form 1. Otherwise, you're going to go back and forth, trying to find the information. If you really have a problem, that you can't get in, or you have problems with that ETRS site, you can send an email to the FCC at etrs@fcc.gov, or they have an 800 number, 877-480-3201, and they will be more than happy to help you with that. The commission has sort of indicated, since this has been going on for several years, and I don't remember the exact year that we first filled out Form 1, but it's been several years ago, and the commission has sort of had rumors floating around that they're going to start taking a look at that. And if you're not actually following their rules concerning Form 1, 2, and 3, they might be sending out little notices to you to maybe, I'm not sure whether it's going to be an NAL or NOV or what it happens to be, but as you know, the commission's rather stickler on dates. They fine people pretty heavy for not having their license renewed or their payments due for their license payments each year. So make sure that you don't slip up and don't forget to fill out these forms. So just take a moment to go through that and make sure those forms are filled out. And let's see, I think we have some questions here. No questions. Somebody said they're working on it now. So that's good to make sure. Now, what is required from an engineering standpoint at the engineering level? And John's going to talk about this and talk about what we actually need and what the engineer has to do or needs to do to get his equipment ready. John?
Well, thank you, Larry. And of course, the first thing that you actually have to have will be an EAS unit, whether it be a DASDAC, a SAGE, or a Gorman Redlick unit. We have those pictured there. And of course, there's also trilithic. The one thing you want to mention, I want to mention too, with the Gorman Redlick unit is you want to be sure that you have the add-on unit for a cap. That's very important, while the other units have everything built in. The most current software is critical. You need to have the latest version that is available for all of the manufacturers, and that's easy to check. You can go onto your manufacturer's website and look for that software, and it'll be readily downloadable. And there were some upgrades that occurred a few years ago that there were some minor charges for from both Sage, DASDAC, and I believe from Gorman Redlick. And if you don't have that particular software version and you have the latest updated to give you access to the current cap versions, you need to get that immediately and not wait on it at all, because that could be a real critical problem for you when it comes to receive the test.
You might run through the some of the folks, Bill or and Harold and Jim, and they can tell people what the current version is.
Yes, that would be fine. If any of you would like to chime in, the most current version for each one of you, Bill and Jim, would y'all chime in on it?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in first since you called me out, and I start with B. The current versions for this test that are going to be working are any version 4 or version 5 software. So both of those are going to work perfectly fine for this upcoming NPT.
Okay, Harold?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, for the Sage NDEC version 95 that was issued in 2019, and there was a important update in 2021. So version 95 is fine for this national periodic test. You don't need Rev 96 for the NPT. Rev 96 is still running on the December the 12th deadline. If you end up getting it by October the 4th, it'll also work fine. So 95 or 96. Make sure you're currently receiving the FEMA weekly test. If you are, and that comes out every Monday at 11 a.m. local time. If you're receiving those FEMA tests, then you should receive the National Periodic Test just fine.
Okay, thank you. And Jim? Or Jim may not be with us yet, I'm not sure. You also, as we mentioned, in addition to the current software, part of that software would be the most current security certificate. That would allow you access to anything that comes down on cap. And again, as Harold mentioned, and it's critical to remember that Monday at 11 a.m. in whichever time zone you happen to be in is when the weekly tests come in from IPAWS. And if you're receiving that, then you should receive the NPT, the national test, without any problem as such. If you're not receiving the required weekly test from IPAWS on Monday at 11 a.m., then you either have a certificate problem or a software problem or a combination thereof, and now would be the time to be correcting that for sure. A couple other things that you want to be certain of. You want to be sure that your units have the correct time. We found from time to time that units could be off, and if they're off or in the wrong time zone, it will not work properly. So you want to be sure that you have that. You also want to ensure that you have your correct configuration to receive. Though I believe that all the units, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong on this, Bill and Harold, that you don't necessarily have to have the NPT programmed in, that the unit will actually send that automatically. But you want to be sure that you do have the correct configuration. And of course, you want to be sure that your station audio is routed through an EAS unit. And I know that seems to be one of those situations that can't happen, but I was actually rebuilding a studio for a client a couple of months ago, and lo and behold, we found out that the audio had been bypassed around the EAS unit. And while the unit was showing that it was receiving tests and sending tests, but it was not going out over the air. So take that little check to be sure that you're actually routing your audio to the transmitter site as it should be done properly. And of course, you want to be sure that you log the information concerning the national test in the station log. Now, while most station logs do not have a place specific for the national test, there are always places, and the log form that Larry had developed has a note section, and all you have to do is write in the time that the test occurred and was received and that it was passed on. So you want to be certain that you do that. And again, engineers should make an effort to be at the EAS equipment location during the test to ensure the status and quality of the audio. If there's a problem with reception or transmission, then you can send an email to the chairman of your state SECC. Now, we really shouldn't have a problem with transmission this time because it will not come down the daisy chain initially. It will come from CAP through iPaws. And so you should have good quality audio for the test, and that would come in immediately upon the trigger from Washington, D.C. So we hope that audio would be a minimal issue since it's not using the daisy chain this time. There will be questions on the third form that you have to complete. That's the one that's due within 30 days after the test. And they will ask quality of report, reception, and just some technical questions on how the report was or the test was received, how it was sent, that type of thing. So and do check your boxes and be sure that they are current and updated. Larry and I were talking this morning, and he actually received a call from a station the other day wanting to know how quick they could get a EAS unit, that they were still using one of the Sage Gray units. So there's still a lot of old equipment out there. It's amazing, and a lot of equipment that didn't have the software updates, and it's got to all be updated and with the proper software for this to work properly. And that information has to be turned into the commission. Larry?
All right, John, let's look at some of the messages. You can see the chat room, I think, as well. Somebody asked about, they filed the Form 1 back in February. Is this an additional requirement file, or does the filing in February suffice? If you have not made any change, and I would suggest that, and the commission does too, that you go on the website and just walk through that Form 1 to make sure there's nothing changed, whether you changed equipment or monitor sources or anything like that. Is that's your feeling, John?
Yes, definitely. You can look at this form at any time, and the nice thing about the form is if you filled it out in the past, pretty much everything's going to be populated in the form except for a couple of questions and certifications. So it makes it very easy unless you happen to have changed a transmitter site or studio location or something like that. It should not be an issue.
Somebody had said, my request to associate my FRN using course has been pending for a length of time. Any suggestions, John, on how he can complete that connection?
Well, I think the easiest thing to do is call the FCC ETRS number that you gave out earlier. And if you could bring that up, Larry, because I think that would be good to have on the screen right now. But that would be the first place I would check. And if they can help you at all there at that particular office, then I would contact your communications attorney and ask them to look into this for you, because that obviously is something that you have to deal with immediately.
That's right. Here's a question which I was not aware of, and Bill, you might comment on this. Somebody said they upgraded to a DASDEC 3, and when they went in to update Form 1, where you actually, there's a drop-down box that shows the versions. Form 1, they don't see the correct software version. It shows 5.0, and of course they're running 5.1 now with the DASDEC 3. Any thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah, that data is set up by the FCC ETRS guys. They just need to update their field. If you have that, I would just set it at the highest you could get, which is 5.0. You should be fine.
Oh, okay, that'd be good. Let's see, here's another one. Let's see what this one says. The station personnel registered all the equipment at the time of the 2021 national test. There have been no hardware or software changes or updates since then. Is another registration still necessary?
Well, I'm a little confused too, Larry, on what they mean by registration, but you have to fill out Form 1, 2, and 3 every year, and 2 and 3 associated with the national test. So if you registered everything, that will carry over from year to year on that form automatically. You are required to go through the form and check it ahead of time. So if you haven't touched your Form 1 as required earlier this year, you have till September the 15th, which will be Friday, this coming Friday. You need to get that taken care of immediately. Or I said this coming Friday, it'll actually be Friday a week. No, that's right. Yep, Friday a week. But you need to look into that and just certify that Form 1. Otherwise, you could be in violation down the road with the commission, and that information does carry over to Form 2 and Form 3. So that is required each year.
Yeah, I think the situation was, you said it was filed in 2021.
Yeah.
Well, each year you do have to file another one. Now, like John said, the information will self-populate from the previous, but you do have to go in and file. Like
Each
now,
year.
the 2020, when you go into it, it asks you what year you file, or it actually populates. I think it comes up and says 2023 national test. So obviously you would have to file another one.
That's correct.
Um,
Next question we have is, will there be a text-to-speech message embedded in the NPT or an audio file? And of course, with CAP, it is a text-to-speech, so that would be correct, and it'd be what would be coming over your unit from FEMA.
Correction on that.
Yes, go ahead, Harold.
This year, the CAP message usually contains, when it comes from FEMA, spoken audio. CAP messages have the option of providing audio or not providing audio. If they do, that's what plays. Historically, in all the previous national periodic tests, FEMA has provided human originated recorded audio. So you will most likely hear that. If there's a problem at an individual unit with picking up that audio, or there's a problem at FEMA in generating it, if there is no audio, a CAP message will then revert to the individual unit's generated text to speech.
Okay, thank you, Harold. Appreciate that correction on that. All right, Larry, let's see, confirming we do not have a file. We do not have to file an ETRS for each of our translators.
That's correct.
Yes.
Everybody has AM, FM television, LPFMs and LPTVs have to file Form 1, but translators do not, since they are just a rebroadcast of the main channel. And one thing that maybe a couple of years ago, this came up, people ask about, do you have to file one for each individual station that you own? And the answer to that is yes. You may have one EAS device that's feeding multiple stations, but you still, the way the form is set up, you can only enter one call letter and one facility ID. So if you have 3 stations using the same EAS device, you have to file for all 3. You can do batch filings if you got 20 or 30 stations you're filing for. You can file them all at one time in a batch file, but it still has to be for each one. Here's another one. John, you want to take that one?
Well, given the test will
WEA.
involve both EAS and WEA, has the FCC and mobile phone providers enhanced the dissemination process since the last NPT on WEA? In addition, how should the public reply to the test regarding receipt and quality? That is a good question. Honestly, I really can't answer what the status is of WEA at this particular time. I know there's been a lot of work and a lot of enhancement going on, but I think Larry and I can really only answer for the broadcast side of it at this particular time. Harold or Bill, either one of you might have some insight into this.
Thank you, Bill. I would say that at this particular point, it's although CAP and the FEMA iPOS system can have multiple channels, CAP EAS is one channel, WEA is another channel. Our understanding is this is not going to include WEA. It is going to be CAP EAS only as the test, thus the form requirements and everything else. So the expectation that we have is that WEA is not included in this NPT. It's only CAP EAS.
It seemed like I read, and maybe I thinking offline, but it seemed like I read that they were going to do a WIA test at 218 and the EAS test would be at 220. John, have you seen that or anybody know about
I
that?
have not seen that. I know that they were talking about doing a separate test, but I'm not sure exactly when that particular test was going to occur.
Somebody says they're trying to log into the ETRS to check and it's not letting me in. That's when you need to call that 800 number, and I'll put that back up here shortly to see what the problem is. But I was on it last night, and the system was working last night.
And information from Harold here. The FCC announcement. FCC announces nationwide emergency alerting tests, plural, on October the 4th. It says announcement that FEMA, in coordination with the FCC, will conduct a nationwide emergency alert system test and wireless emergency alert WIA test on October the 4th. So the original information was that it would be sent on both EAS and on WIA. Maybe that has changed, but this is the main FCC announcement.
Thank you.
I think I had read something similar to that.
Yeah, that was released on August the 3rd.
Yeah, I may stay corrected on that, but it wasn't our intent or that we would see WIA on this one. So again, my mistake, perhaps.
All right,
Here's a good question, John.
Yeah.
Are HD sub channels 2, 3, and 4 or one required to air? The answer to that is absolutely.
Yes.
All tests, whether it's a test or an alert, are required to go out on any multi-channel. If you're an FM station and you're running HD channels, HD 2, 3, 4, however many you have, or if you're a TV station and you're running .2s and 3s and 4s, all the EAS information has to be disseminated over all those program channels. And I'm scrolling down here.
Yeah, it says, should any or all IPAWS activities show up in the SAGE digital index logs? Harold, I'll let you answer that. I know what the answer is, but since you're SAGE, go ahead.
You will see. This was a message on the chat.
Yes.
Should any and all IPAWS activity show up? Well, only IPAWS activity that matches the filter that you've got it set up for. So if your filter is set up for Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, you will receive all CAP messages for Allegheny County, Pennsylvania that matches that filter. You of course don't want to receive every CAP message. There's a bunch of them a day, and if the National Weather Service turns on their CAP feed for EAS, there will be thousands every day. So you'll receive everything directed to a filter that you've got set up in your index.
Thank
Should
you,
we
Harold.
still perform our weekly test the week of the national test? I think that falls under the same thing as an RMT. If an RMT or any other type of test like that is transmitted during the week, then legally you're not required to do a weekly test that week.
If you've sent, and this is where it kind of gets arcane, and you got to look at the handbook, and you got to look at part 11, and you got to read the tea leaves, and we'll always say SAGE does not offer legal advice. But there are cutouts in there for if you've aired a certain type of alert on your, if you've relayed one, then you don't need to relay other ones. The intent of the weekly test, though, is it's testing your ability to send things. So in general, you have to originate a weekly test. You never want to relay someone else's weekly test, but you have to originate your own weekly test. Now, monthly tests are slightly different, and don't want to get into that. But nobody has ever been admonished for sending a monthly test that was for their area. If there's two in the same month for accidental reasons, if you're crossing a state border and your operational areas in two different states and you receive two different monthly tests, what do you do then? That's beyond my pay grade.
John, here's a good question that popped up. Do you have to file a Form 1 for your multi-channels, .1, .2, and .3, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. It has never been expressed. That is a good question. They're looking at the main channel and assuming that the main channel would also include the .2s, 3s, and 4s, or HD 2s, 3s, and 4s. So, but that has not ever been. That would be a lot of extra paperwork for a lot of extra people. So I haven't seen anything about that. But good question.
Let's see. Did we miss any questions, John?
I think we covered everything. Are there any additional questions out there?
Yeah, I was scrolling back through all the. There's quite a few chats here, but I think we sort of covered
Oh,
all
we
of them.
did. We did have one question said wanting to know if anybody knew the current software version required for trialithic EasyCap B 4020. I don't know that I have any of that information. Larry, do you, or maybe Bill or Harold?
No, I don't. I know the Easy Cap is normally something that's used by cable systems
Yeah.
mostly, but I don't know of anything about the software version. You need to check with Trilithic and find out what their situation
Yep.
is. Well, we want to thank everybody for attending, and if you have any questions whatsoever, drop me an email, and if I don't know the answer or John doesn't know the answer, we'll find out. We're not going to leave you in the dark. So just be sure to drop us an email, drop me an email here, and I'll get with John, or if need be, we'll get with Bill and Harold and Jim and get the answer to you quickly. So the main thing to remember is if you are receiving the required weekly test from IPAWS, as John said, which comes down at 11 a.m. local time each week, then barring any problems with your filtering setup or the system itself, you should be fine to go. So make sure that you look and make sure that you're receiving that weekly test from IPAWS. Again, if you have any other questions, make sure you just drop me an email at lwilkins@al-ba.com, and we'll be happy to help you any way we can. We thank everybody for attending, and let us know if we can help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.